Ethan Walker never imagined that an unpaid $200 HOA fee could spiral into a full-blown war for his home, his peace, and his pride. When the first warning letter arrived, he had just come home from a 12-hour shift at the county water plant, his hands still smelling faintly of chlorine and steel. The letterhead, the Oaks Residential Association, looked harmless enough, embossed with gold lettering and a tidy tree logo that almost looked friendly. But the tone beneath those words carried the familiar arrogance that every homeowner in the Oaks had come to fear. Immediate payment required to avoid lien and foreclosure. Ethan laughed under his breath at first, tossing it onto the kitchen counter beside a stack of junk mail. He'd already mailed a check weeks earlier. His bank even showed it cleared. He figured it was another clerical mistake from their new HOA president, a man named Brent Calhoun, an ex-realtor with a shiny smile and a bad habit of talking over people. But the next week, another envelope appeared. This one wasn't friendly. It said, "Final notice" in bold red ink, followed by words that made his chest tighten. "Property lien pending." His wife, Marla, glanced up from the sink, worry flickering in her eyes. They'd worked their entire lives for this small brick house on Maple Drive, a modest 2-bedroom built by Ethan's father in the early 80s. Losing it over a clerical error was unthinkable. Ethan called the HOA office first thing Monday morning. What followed wasn't a conversation. It was a script. The clerk, a curt woman who introduced herself as Denise, said flatly, "According to our system, your account is delinquent by $1,840, including late fees." Ethan's jaw tightened. $1,800? For a $200 fee? She sighed. That includes administrative costs, certified notices, and processing. He felt heat crawl up his neck. "I mailed my check the day the notice came out." Silence. Then, "You'll have to discuss that with the board at the next hearing." Click. That evening, Ethan sat at his worn kitchen table with a calculator, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. He wasn't just angry, he was insulted. His father had poured sweat into this land back when the Oaks was still a gravel road community. Now some polished board thought they could intimidate him into paying twice for something he already handled. Over the following month, the notices kept coming, each one sterner than the last. When a bright orange sticker appeared on his mailbox, "Foreclosure proceedings may begin," he drove straight to the HOA office. The building looked more like a miniature courthouse than a neighborhood office. Columns, tinted windows, and a marble sign that probably cost more than his truck. Inside, Brent Calhoun was holding court, laughing with 2 board members over coffee. "Mr. Walker," he said cheerily when Ethan approached. "You're behind on dues." Ethan held up a folder of receipts, cleared checks, and bank statements. "No, Brent, I'm not. I've got every payment right here." Brent didn't even look. "Then you shouldn't mind paying the late fees." His tone was syrupy, dismissive, like he was talking to a stubborn child. "It's just policy. Policy doesn't override proof," Ethan shot back. The laughter around the coffee machine stopped. Brent's smile stiffened. "If you're unwilling to cooperate, Mr. Walker, the association will pursue collection through our legal team." Ethan leaned forward. "Then I'll see you in court." He turned and left, heart hammering, fury tightening his throat. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, those 6 words, had just started a chain reaction that would unravel everything Brent Calhoun had built. The lawsuit arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by certified mail. Notice of foreclosure, HOA versus Walker. The amount due now stood at $5,237. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. His lawyer friend, Jenna Ruiz, a tough property attorney he'd met years ago during a county inspection, came over that night. She skimmed the papers, muttering under her breath, "They can't do this legally. You've got proof of payment." She paused, flipping through the fine print. "Unless..." Ethan looked up. "Unless what?" "Unless the HOA's debt has been sold." He frowned. "Sold?" She nodded slowly. "Some associations package unpaid dues and sell them to third-party collectors for pennies on the dollar. It's legal, shady, and messy." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, the cicadas droning, the air thick with late summer humidity. Across the street, the HOA clubhouse lights burned bright, Brent's silver SUV parked out front. Inside that building, Ethan imagined his name on a board circled in red, another example for the neighbors. He promised himself one thing. He'd find out exactly how this debt changed hands. Over the next week, Ethan became a man obsessed. Every lunch break, he was at the county clerk's office, digging through filings, tracing paper trails. One dusty file caught his eye, an assignment of debt signed not by the HOA treasurer, but by a company called Sunset Capital Recovery LLC. He followed that lead to a P.O. box and a disconnected phone number. But when he mentioned the name to Jenna, her eyebrows shot up. "Sunset Capital?" she said. "They buy defaulted HOA debt in bulk. Sometimes the HOA themselves finance those deals." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You mean Brent could have sold my debt to himself? Or to a shell company he controls?" That night, Ethan sat at his computer, scanning public corporate records. He wasn't tech-savvy, but determination has a way of turning anyone into an investigator. It took hours, but he found it. An LLC formed 6 months earlier, listing a managing member named BC Holdings, Brent Calhoun. His fingers trembled with anger. This wasn't incompetence. This was theft. Brent had manufactured delinquencies, inflated late fees, and sold them to a company he secretly owned, turning homeowners' hardship into personal profit. Ethan printed every document, every signature, and every transfer form. By dawn, his kitchen table looked like a detective board. Papers everywhere, arrows drawn in red marker connecting names and dates. He wasn't just fighting for his house anymore. He was fighting for everyone Brent had wronged. The next HOA meeting was packed. Brent, as usual, smiled his politician smile and tapped his gavel. "Let's begin." Ethan waited until the public comment section. When his turn came, he stood, holding a folder thick with evidence. "Before you foreclose on my property, Mr. Calhoun, maybe you'd like to explain why the HOA's debt collector shares your initials." The room went silent. Brent's smirk faltered. Ethan slid copies of incorporation records onto the table. "Sunset Capital Recovery LLC, registered under BC Holdings. That's you, isn't it?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brent stammered something about misunderstandings, but Ethan wasn't finished. "You've been selling our debts to yourself. That's embezzlement, Brent. That's fraud." The meeting descended into chaos. Neighbors shouting, board members exchanging panicked glances. Ethan walked out into the cool night air, heart pounding. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. He didn't know how long this fight would take, but he finally had the upper hand. He just needed to find a way to make the law catch up with Brent's lies, and soon he'd discover a loophole so powerful it would turn the entire HOA upside down. 2 weeks after that explosive HOA meeting, Ethan's life had become a blur of phone calls, photocopies, and cautious hope. The neighbors who'd once waved politely from their driveways now stopped him to whisper, "We had no idea, Ethan," or "We got letters, too." It turned out that nearly a dozen homeowners had received similar foreclosure threats for unpaid dues, and every one of them showed proof they'd already paid. Brent Calhoun's charm was cracking, but he still strutted around the community clubhouse as if he owned it. Ethan knew better now. He'd traced enough records to see the pattern. The HOA was deep in debt, years of poor management masked by hidden transfers between Brent's shell companies, and somewhere in that tangled mess was a way to turn Brent's own greed against him. The break came by accident. Jenna called one afternoon, sounding almost giddy. "You won't believe this. The HOA's debt portfolio is being auctioned off next month." Ethan blinked. "Auctioned off?" "Yep," she said. Apparently, Brent used HOA reserves as collateral for a short-term loan from a private lender. That lender just defaulted the lien. "The debt, including your so-called delinquency, is going up for sale." Ethan leaned back, heart pounding. "So theoretically, anyone could buy it?" Jenna hesitated, then laughed. "Technically, yes. Anyone with the money." The words lodged in his mind like a spark in dry grass. Anyone with the money. That night, he sat under the porch light with a calculator and a beer, running numbers on a yellow pad. Between his savings, his retirement withdrawal, and a loan from his brother, he could scrape together maybe $25,000. It wasn't much, but HOA debt rarely sold for face value. It went for pennies on the dollar. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a quiet phantom at county offices, learning everything he could about how debt auctions worked. He discovered that the sale would be handled online, a bulk transaction of defaulted homeowner accounts totaling roughly $310,000 in unpaid dues. But the opening bid? $12,000. The irony nearly made him laugh. Brent's empire of intimidation, built on overcharging his neighbors, was about to be sold for less than the price of a used pickup. Ethan made his move in silence. He registered under a newly formed LLC, Callahan Asset Group, named after his late father, to keep Brent from recognizing his name. He set up a separate bank account, wired the deposit, and spent sleepless nights rehearsing every possible outcome. Jenna helped him draw up transfer documents, promising that if he won, they'd immediately file notice of ownership with the county clerk. On the morning of the auction, Ethan sat in his truck outside the old water plant, laptop balanced on his knees, heart hammering with each refresh of the bidding page. It was surreal, watching Brent's predatory little empire appear as a line item on a screen. Portfolio 17B, Residential Association dues. The Oaks. The countdown clock hit 0. Bids started at 12,000, then jumped to 15. Someone else pushed to 17. Ethan waited, fingers hovering. At the 30-second mark, he entered 19,000 even. Silence. 10 seconds left. 5. 1. Sold. The screen flashed green. Winning bidder, Callahan Asset Group. He exhaled so hard he almost laughed. In that moment, Ethan Walker, the man Brent tried to evict, owned every cent of the HOA's delinquent debt, including his own. Within 48 hours, the sale was finalized. Jenna filed the notice of assignment with the county, then leaned across her desk with a grin. Congratulations, Mr. Walker. You're now the HOA's biggest creditor. Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. Let's make sure they know it. They did. The following Monday, Brent stormed into Ethan's driveway, red-faced and sputtering. You think this little stunt changes anything? You still owe the association. Ethan didn't even raise his voice. He handed Brent a neatly folded letter. That's funny, Brent, because your association now owes me. Brent blinked. What? Ethan cut him off. I bought the debt. Every penny. Which means the HOA's payment obligations are now to me. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. The look on Brent's face, shock curdling into panic, was worth every sleepless night. Over the next few days, the ripple effect spread through the Oaks like wildfire. Board members resigned. Neighbors whispered. One even slipped Ethan a USB drive of internal emails showing Brent ordering the treasurer to lose payment records for certain homeowners. It was the smoking gun they needed. Jenna compiled everything, fraudulent ledgers, fake invoices, bank transfers to BC Holdings, and built a case solid enough to hand straight to the county prosecutor. The sheriff's department moved fast once they saw the documentation. One morning, Ethan was sipping coffee on his porch when 2 unmarked cars pulled into Brent's driveway across the street. He watched as officers knocked, spoke briefly, then led Brent out in handcuffs. The neighborhood went dead silent except for the sound of shutters clicking from behind curtains. Brent tried to shout something about a misunderstanding, but nobody believed him anymore. For Ethan, it wasn't triumph he felt. It was relief, deep and quiet. He'd spent months fighting to prove he wasn't wrong, that decency could still win in a place corrupted by arrogance. That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting. For the first time, they asked Ethan to sit at the front. The interim board president, an older woman named Grace, stood and cleared her throat. Mr. Walker, she said, we owe you an apology and our thanks. You saved this neighborhood. Ethan shook his head. No, ma'am. I just stopped one man from ruining it. The room fell into applause, hesitant at first, then genuine. But for Ethan, the story wasn't over yet. The legal cleanup would take months. Still, as he drove home under the glow of the streetlights that night, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't the target anymore. He was the warning. And somewhere deep down, he knew Brent's downfall had taught the Oaks a lesson they'd never forget. The law cuts both ways. And sometimes the quiet guy with a file folder and a stubborn streak is the most dangerous neighbor you'll ever cross. Months passed, and what began as a single man's quiet rebellion had become a neighborhood reckoning. Brent Calhoun's trial was headline news in the local paper. Former HOA president charged with fraud, forgery, and misuse of association funds. Ethan Walker read the story every morning over black coffee, still half disbelieving that the man who once swaggered through community meetings was now defending himself before a judge. Yet even with Brent gone, the neighborhood was fractured. Homeowners were weary, finances strained, trust eroded. Ethan hadn't planned to be a leader, but when the interim board asked if he would help restructure the association, he surprised himself by saying yes. Only temporarily, he told Marla, just until things stabilize. What followed was the slow, tedious work of repairing what greed had broken, auditing accounts, renegotiating contracts, returning excess fees to families who'd been overcharged. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. The county appointed a financial monitor, and together they uncovered nearly a decade of falsified expenses, security upgrades that never existed, landscaping payments to shell vendors, even a phantom maintenance crew Brent had invented to siphon extra cash. Each discovery made Ethan's stomach churn, yet each one strengthened his resolve. He made one rule for the new board: transparency or nothing. Every budget line went online, every vote was public. For the first time, the Oaks felt like a community again. Kids played in driveways instead of whispering about foreclosures. Neighbors who'd stopped waving started bringing each other coffee. But justice, Ethan learned, isn't just about what's punished, it's about what's restored. When the civil court ruled that Brent owed restitution, most assumed the money would disappear into legal limbo. Ethan used his creditor position to ensure otherwise. He negotiated with the receiver to convert Brent's seized assets, a boat, a luxury SUV, and that ridiculous marble office furniture, into repayment for the homeowners. When checks arrived in their mailboxes months later, some neighbors cried on their porches. Others came to thank him personally, hands trembling with disbelief. He always said the same thing: "You're just getting back what was yours." Yet deep down he knew the battle had changed him. The man who once fixed pipes at the county water plant now understood property law better than most attorneys. Jenna teased him about starting a consulting firm. Walker HOA Defense, she joked, but he only laughed. What mattered was peace. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped behind the oaks that gave the neighborhood its name, Ethan sat on his porch watching the streetlights flicker on. A hum of sprinklers and distant laughter drifted through the air. Marla joined him, handing over a mug of tea. "Do you ever think about moving?" she asked softly. He smiled. Not anymore. In the distance, a for sale sign came down in front of Brent's old house, now owned by a young couple expecting their first child. New beginnings. The following week, Ethan attended what would be his last board meeting. The agenda was simple: dissolve the remaining debts and dissolve his company, Callahan Asset Group, transferring the HOA's financial independence back to the community. When the vote passed unanimously, applause filled the room. Grace, now officially elected president, turned to him with moist eyes. "You could have sold this debt for profit," she said. "Why didn't you?" Ethan paused, looking around at the faces, tired, relieved, grateful. "Because some things aren't for sale." The meeting ended with laughter, coffee, and a rare feeling of unity. Outside, as he stepped into the cool night air, the sky was perfectly clear, a deep, endless blue scattered with stars. He remembered his father's words from years ago, the ones he'd nearly forgotten. "If you take care of the land, it'll take care of you." He'd lived those words without realizing it. The land wasn't just dirt and deeds, it was people, honesty, and memory. Months later, reporters would still call him the man who bought his own foreclosure, a legend whispered across homeowner forums. But to Ethan, it was simpler. It was a lesson about patience, about standing your ground without losing your soul. As he locked the door for the night, he glanced one last time at the framed deed hanging above the mantel. The Oaks. Lot 17 Walker Family Trust. He smiled quietly, turned off the light, and let the house, the one they'd tried to take, rest in peace, finally his again.